Welcome to this, hold on for a second, watch this. WAP! Our open house for our arguing and reading in comics classes. My name is Brandon. I almost want to say the word inventor. That feels like it's overblown in this context, and in many contexts, truthfully. But yeah, it's kind of true, I think, maybe in this one. I'm the guy who, founder of Science is Weird, but also I made these specific classes. What is about to happen is I'm going to talk about what the heck it is that we do in these close reading comics classes. And I will give people a chance to ask any questions. I'm actually going to invert that. I'm going to do something I don't usually do. If you'd like to ask questions right now, feel free to do so. I'm going to turn the chat on in this. I don't usually do that because I hate doing that. It's very distracting to me. So I'm probably just going to ignore the chat until, I don't. But feel free to lodge questions in here right now for this, or at any point in this. I ask that you only use the chat for that sort of thing, though. Okay, hi. Brandon, me, open house, this, reading comics, arguing comics. I'll talk about reading comics first. Arguing comics, I believe that we are either out of seats for that or nearly out of seats for that. So that is part of why I will speak less of it, but it's really fun to talk about. I can tell some fun stories about that and show you some fun little experiments that we had done last year, because that class did start us off as an experiment. Okay, so let me talk first about reading comics. If you want to ask any questions specific about arguing comics, you can take a look at that. Oh, I should probably say that you can check out a lot of information on the website. If you go to sciencesweird.com, go to close reading, at the Who Are We button at the top there, scroll down. Oh, look, this is where we are right now. It's like looking into 2 mirrors. Wow. Okay, great. Close reading talks about this. And if you go to reading comics, you can see a bunch of the really boring details that, frankly, you probably shouldn't ask me because you probably shouldn't trust my answers. I'm the sort of person who, if asked to state any date that is not, Christmas or my birthday, I'm probably going to get it wrong. When was the 4th of July first held? October 8th, right? Okay. So you can take a look at some of the things over here. But let me talk about maybe the bleeding core of this thing. And that is this. What I say this as a father, what so many of us want for our kids is for them to desperately fall in love with the written word. And not just to fall in love, but to stay in love. And to have the capabilities that one builds when one is in love with something. The ability, in other words, to do close reading, to really focus on the nuances, the slight turns of phrase, using this word as opposed to this near synonym, and make sense of that. Because, with TikTok and YouTube and what have you, it's easy to imagine that we are moving into a less text-based civilization. But really looking at the big picture, it seems like the opposite of that is true. We're probably going to have the QWERTY keyboard forever. Even when looking at ChatGPT now and all that, right? Like we have all these new technologies that are explicitly text-based. We're becoming more and more textual. And to be able to do this kind of reading really seems to change, not just literally like a person's brain, right? You can look at people who gain literacy early on in life. They take on the FFA, the something fusiform area, frontal fusiform area. If you look at the brain of somebody who learns to read when they're really, really young, as opposed to like when they're an adult, they take this part of the brain that's right somewhere about here, which is ordinarily designed, or ordinarily purposed, let's say, for recognizing other people's faces. If you're face blind, you have a bad, wonky one of these, specifically on the left side here. And we use that. We use that for recognizing letter shapes instead. We've co-opted that. You can literally see the difference in people's brains. Also, people learn to read really early, which is to say as kids as opposed to adults, they are actually worse at recognizing faces than they would be otherwise. Why am I talking about this? Because I have ADHD. That's the reason that I'm talking about this. Reading is fundamental. Definitely not evolved to do it. I have a whole lesson on that at some point. But then when you do it young, when you do it well, it's fundamental. It changes the relationship that you have with the world. So many adults are only technically literate. We want to help our kids go far, far beyond that. And it's hard. It's difficult for all sorts of different reasons, even before you add on things like dyslexia or what have you, to make that more difficult. So how can we try to combat all of the problems? How can we help lead our kids into a deep love of writing? Let me suggest some ways that we absolutely should not try to do this. Once upon a time, I was a SAT coach. I would meet with people and help them in a very short amount of time learn to write better, read better, do math better. It was really good for me and it was good for them. And I'm really happy that I'm out of it right now. I love teaching science and close reading to people more. But because of this, I became aware of the entire world of the, I don't know, probably a $500 million or $1 billion a year industry of teaching kids. Vocabulary is one of the places that the curricula really get thick and heavy on. So I want to talk about vocabulary for a second, and then we'll pan out and talk about the rest of it. So frequently you see these curriculums that have flashcards. Flashcards are good. I'm actually pro flashcard. I think they're underrated, where the word will be on one side and this long winding definition will be on the other side. These are terrible. These are the devil. Never buy these. You're not going to remember this. You're not going to remember this. It's terrible. Better were the ones that would have the word on one side and the other side a short synonym for that word, or sometimes a few short synonyms. They all kind of work because you can actually remember that. It sticks in your brain in a way that the other things don't. But better than this still was putting this back in context. I have these books, I'd work with these books sometimes, where there would be a, one side, you'd have the text to Mary Shelley's Frankenstein or something like that. And there would be underlined, highlighted, bold-faced, whatever, a bunch of words, kind of hard words, either in context or just hard words, college level words, SAT level words. And then on the other side of the page, they would have those words with their simple definitions after them. And I loved this because this was contextual. Oftentimes, yeah, it was contextual. It was helpful as a way of helping you read the text. And I thought, what if we took that and we went one better with it? Because it turns out that usually learning an individual word is not oh so important in understanding a novel. With something that's as long as a novel, it's the context, it's the story, it's the characters, sometimes everything will hinge on exactly one word, but not too often. What we want to do, if we want to make learning high-level vocabulary even easier, is reframe it as from something, it's like eating your vegetables. Do this thing because it's good for you. To turn it into something more like eating cake. Do something because it's enjoyable. Now, I don't want to say that learning vocabulary is... No, I think I can say that learning vocabulary can actually be enjoyable if the learning of the vocabulary fills a purpose, solves a problem, answers some questions that you've been having. And we can go even better than that. We can suggest that what we want is not cake, but cake pops. Tiny little bits of something. Could be a poem, could be a recipe, could be it could be almost anything that's small. A joke could be a song lyric, where if there's a single word that a kid doesn't know, and if they like the song or the poem or the whatever recipe, they're going to want to know what that one word means. One word in a cake pop is a lot bigger than one word is in an entire cake. I really feel like this metaphor, I'm pressing it way too hard. And like, pops, cake, what are we talking about here? Okay, so what we're talking about is exactly this. The idea of close reading. Close reading is not just about learning vocabulary words. Close reading is learning about, like I said before, like what words did the author not use? What is like the cadence of the thing that they are reading? What are the punctuation marks? When one character says a certain thing, if there's some ambiguity there, like why is there ambiguity there? Close reading is this master skill. And I'm reminded of Do you know Vladimir Nabokov? He wrote Lolita, he wrote A Pale Fire. He's usually bandied about as one of the greatest authors in the English language in the 20th century. Also, he studied butterflies. He was a butterfly scientist at Harvard University, so there, now you know that. He once said, curiously enough, one can never really read a book. One can only reread it. A good reader, he continues, a major reader, an active and creative reader is a... Can you guess the word here? Rereader. So often, when we try to take kids through, what we call literature and get them to ask questions of the text and whatever, it's wasted because we only have them read it one time. It's only when you read a thing through once and then enjoy it enough that you want to go back through again and get the deeper understanding that you actually understand what's happening. This is true of books, this is true of songs, this is true of movies. And so if we're going to have kids go through something and actually try to understand it, do that step of close reading. Sometimes people call it deep reading. I like the phrase close reading. What we need to do is have something that they love and something that is short so they can reread it without spending a ton of time on it. All right, so enter the world of micro literature. What reading comics is, and to a lesser extent arguing comics, is this trip through a very specific instance of micro literature. The phrase is not particularly widely used, but I didn't invent it. And we read comics together. We've been focusing thus far, last year and this year, on Calvin and Hobbes because it's just the flipping best. Eventually, we do need to do something else, just seems it's a thing that we should. Maybe we'll do the Far Side cartoons by Gary Larson at some point. Those have not aged as well as Calvin and Hobbes have. I thought about doing an XKCD class, xkcd.com. So what we do is we read comics together. Now, I have the kids read them ahead of time. Just last year we did 10 pages a day. That was a slightly different page format from a slightly different book. So I think it's still going to be 10 pages a day from this, but I have to kind of play with that. Yeah, they read it. I have them do some steps with it. And then when we come together in class, we talk about it. And we find these really subtle things to talk about. Put a magnifying glass onto the comics. We have debates. This is even before we get into arguing comics. We have debates in class with what does the author actually mean there? We ask, why is this funny? And that's basically the gist of the class. I can talk about the specific method that we use for it. Looks like no one has asked any questions yet. So the chat is on. Okay, great. If you'd like to ask any questions, feel free to throw them in there. Okay, yeah, let's talk about actually then how the class itself works. We've been doing this, I should say that we've been doing this now with Science is Weird this will be the second year. Did we do it before then? I feel like we might have. But anyway, before I did this in Science is Weird, I did this back in the day when my wife and I co-ran an upper elementary school classroom together. We did this whole Calvin and Hobbes curriculum where we'd act out the Calvin and Hobbes strips verbally, voice act out the Calvin and Hobbes strips together, and then talk about the questions that arose from it. And then we, as part of that, developed this whole system for learning the vocabulary words, really locking them in. And it was amazing. All of that was based on sort of this original stuff that I started for high school students when I was helping high school students get higher scores on their SAT tests. You're thinking that SAT tests is superfluous, that you can just say SAT and that means test. It actually doesn't. Once upon a time, SAT stood for Scholastic Aptitude Test. But then it was changed because it was seen that felt too much like an IQ test sort of name to Scholastic Assessment Test, which made no sense because it did not assess the specific things that students had learned. It's a certain kind of test, and the SAT is not that. So then it was renamed. And the thing that it was renamed to mean now is the same as what the letters DVD stand for. DVD originally stood for digital video disc. Then they realized, oh, we can put lots of things on DVDs, not just videos. So it was renamed to be digital versatile disc. And then it was renamed again because they realized, like, that sounds stupid, to be the same thing that SAT stands for, which is absolutely nothing. That's why you can say SAT test. It's not like ATM machine. Okay. Microliterature, talking about this. This is the basic metaphor that the class works on. First, the first layer is love. We have a step to help kids fall in love with, or at least liking, the strips that they're reading, that they enjoy, they have a fun time with it, so they want to do more with it. The next one is a way of specifically triggering kids' curiosity with things they don't know in the text. The next one is mastery, to really learn everything there is to learn in those specific 10 pages or whatever. And the fourth step is, if you really want to lock everything that you've just learned, at least word-wise, into your long-term memory in the scientifically most effective way, efficient way possible, that's that. Now, I want to point out that the notion of this metaphor is that you have to have the lower layer before you have the layer above it. You have to do love before you try to do the curiosity. You have to do the curiosity before you do mastery. If you try to get these in the wrong order, everything explodes. I'm really proud of this method of learning to do close reading. I'm so proud of this method. I've seen this method do amazing things in kids' lives. If you do it in the wrong order, you can really mess kids up by giving them these this book, this comic strip that so many kids grow to desperately love, and make them dislike it. And that, right, like, there is no salvation for us when we do this sort of thing. Like, this is a failure. That is an absolute failure as a parent, right? And I've made bigger failures as a parent before, to be clear, but right, I regret them. I rue each of them. We don't want to lead into this situation. My own backstory with Calvin and Hobbes is that my parents bought me a Calvin and Hobbes book. It was Weirdos from Another Planet, when I was, I believe, in 3rd grade, when we were on vacation in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And I fought tooth and nail against us getting this book. I really wanted to get a dinosaur book because, I didn't have enough dinosaur books. Mom said, "You've had enough dinosaur books." That's how I know. And she forced me to buy it. And I probably didn't talk for the next couple of days, just like going again and again and again and again through these things until I basically memorized them. I wasn't trying to memorize them. I remember, then I got like the other ones. And this was still when Calvin and Hobbes were still being published in the weekly papers. And I remember once in the 9th grade bus, handing one of the books that I had to my friend Bill Sattler, who was sitting in the seat behind me, and said, "Hey, just read like the first square, the first panel from any random strip in this book. I want to see if I can remember anything from the other 3 panels." And, I could like almost word for word do it. Why am I saying this right now? First of all, to make you question my judgment as a human being. This seems extreme, right? This seems like a little bit unnecessary, extra. Yeah, but this is the place of love where this entire class comes from. Your mileage may differ. But the other thing is that it was by doing this that I learned like all of the words in English that any high schooler should ever, or any college student should ever be expected to know. Obviously, it's not literally true. But when I took my SAT in high school, I got a perfect score on the reading, the verbal section of it. And in part, that's because I never stopped reading ever. Right? Like, I was addicted to reading. But I think that of all of that, in no small part, was that the fact that I had memorized automatically all the words from Calvin and Hobbes. Okay, so let's talk about the love step of this first. If your kid is part of this, what I have us do I have a syllabus here? I think I need to go to here. I don't want this yet. I once. Okay, so you'll get a syllabus. I haven't put together the new one for this year yet, but this is the one from last year. Walks you through exactly how to do these sorts of things. But, you know, read these pages and this other book just for fun. That's the love step. So that's the love step. Does that make sense? There's nothing else important part of it. You don't go to read it and have to do anything to the text. You read it. Maybe you like it. Maybe you move on from it. Whatever. You want to read, just whatever. It's up to the kid for this. So let's actually just go ahead and try. I wanted to pick out some, not quite at random, but almost at random. For this, where do I have my, this one. I'm in a purple mode today. Okay. So, Miss Wormwood. Yes, Calvin? If ignorance is bliss, this lesson would appear to be a deliberate attempt on your part to deprive me of happiness, the pursuit of which is my unalienable right according to the Declaration of Independence. I therefore assert my patriotic prerogative not to know this material. I'll be out in the playground. Help! Marcus! I love this one so much. So I'm actually really curious about this. From 0 to 10, how much do you feel like you understand what was funny in that strip? You have 10 seconds. Go for it. Caroline asks, when will we receive the syllabus? This weekend. Thank you for asking that. If you've already signed up for class. Oh, I should say something here. So go ahead and type in 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8. 10 would be, yes, I totally understand what is going on here. 0 would be, I am so lost right now. I should say, as those roll in, that I feel terrible. I got sick earlier this week, and I am behind on all of the things that I really wanted to do this week. What I will be doing tomorrow, let's just say, in the next really big course, here we go. There's going to be a third option in here, and it's going to be the, what's the word? Recordings only for the reading comics class. It'll be a bit cheaper. And then particularly if you're in if you're in a time zone where it's not convenient for you to be able to see these, it's a way for you to take it, get, like 90% probably of the value from the thing, but maybe not some of the fun of being in the live class. So that's important. Yeah. Well, I don't know exactly how much cheaper it'll be, but it'll be cheaper. I'll have it up on the website by tomorrow. If you've already signed up for reading comics, not for arguing comics, but for reading comics, arguing comics, the arguing part has to be live. We don't do that as a recording for privacy reasons. But the reading one we do is a webinar. Kids don't have their faces on. If you've already signed up for reading comics and you are only planning to do the recordings anyway, don't worry, you'll be able to shoot an email to Angela and she'll give you a discount that will match. Okay, so I see a lot of people who are saying 8s and 9s. When we did this with students last year, oftentimes they thought, I'm remembering this correctly, like 6, 7, 8, 9. And then, oh my gosh, the depths that we went to that made them realize, like, I had no idea what was going on there. Now, I know that I'm speaking to, I think, mostly adults here. So yeah, I bet your numbers are correct about this. So let's just zoom in to this and take a look at, like, what words are here that people might not know. No, hold on. I'm getting ahead of myself, right? Because this is the love step. All you do is read it, and maybe the kid finds it funny, maybe they don't. Great, wonderful. I'm gonna pound you in gym class, Twinkie. Oh yeah? I'd like to see you try it. Just love this. My brain wishes my ego had call waiting. From 0 to 10, how about this one? Where are you at with it? We went and spent such a long time. No, we spent some time in class talking about, okay, what does ego mean, right? So you go into Freud's theory of id, ego, superego to understand, like, what the notion of the psyche is that particularly is drawing from. Ego is I think it's both Latin and Greek, actually, word for I. So my brain wishes my I-ness, myself, kind of, right? Because now ego is being used in, like, the sense of puffed up pride sort of sense of them. But then that was almost the easy part. What call waiting is, or was in the year 1992, that was the harder one to explain. Yeah, so this one is actually a lot easier, right, than the first one is with this. I want to call attention to the fact that there is like frank discussion of bullying. Also, like if you're the sort of person who is like, oh, like I don't want my kids to be exposed to things that were commonly talked about to kids in the 1990s. And actually, for the book that we're doing this year, 80s, since this is from 1985 to 1986 is when these strips ran. They're in these books. These are this chronicles the first 2 years of Calvin and Hobbes. The very first strip in here is the one where Calvin catches Hobbes. It's pretty great. Recommended, as they could say. What am I talking about? Oh, because I wanted. So right now, maybe you're thinking, geez, these words, this is all way the heck too high for my kid. Yeah, okay, so first of all, maybe, so I want to just say like that might mean that the class is a bad choice for you. Although I do want to point out that like we just try to be very generous with if people try to class and pretty quickly on they find out this is not the class for me, right? Like we're happy to give a prorated discount, or if it's early on in the class, a total discount for that. We don't want your money if you're not really enjoying what you're doing in class. So but also that's not so hard. Or sorry, some of them are not so hard. There's just this and then yeah. You're right. Food does taste better this way. There are no words. It's just enjoyable. A lot of Calvin and Hobbes, just like page after page of, I don't know, like physical, I want to say like poop jokes, but I'm sure there's some poop jokes in Calvin and Hobbes somewhere. There's like a booger joke. There's a couple booger jokes. Anyway, fairly lowbrow humor. A lot of physical humor, right? Buster Keaton sort of stuff. And then interspersed with these fairly high level discussions of philosophy, interspersed with occasional really high level discussions of like the philosophy of art or existentialism or a lot of ethics and some even meta ethics. So there's like legal ethics. We get some really high level things. But then a lot of it is just very, very lowbrow. As I, the maniacal tyrant, look down upon my pathetic subjects, I reflect on how their puny lives mean nothing to me, except as the brute labor necessary to execute my mad designs. My lunatic whims are their laws. Ha ha ha! I thought I told you to gather the trash. Being a parent must be nice, right? What's the joke here, right? So this is an interesting thing. Oftentimes in class, we spend a good amount of time talking like, what is the joke here? We always talk quite a bit about the philosophy of humor. If you go to the Wikipedia philosophy of humor page, or theories of humor, I forget what it's called. I used to have class ones on the philosophy of humor. You'll see that there are three major ones. And we talk one by Aristotle, one by, I don't know who the other ones are by. Freud Freud keeps going up in this. And one by the postmodern theorists. The superiority, relief, and incongruity theses of what makes something funny, what makes anything funny. And then we argue like, okay, like which of these three theorists would be able to explain why this particular joke is funny the best, right? Because, this is the sort of thing that you can talk about with kids, and it's really interesting to talk about it. It's also really fun in that it allows kids to... These are little stories, right? Like, actually, this is maybe easier. Like, this is a story, and there's a beginning, middle, and end, and whatever. But then the end of this implies that there's a conversation that happened beforehand. Okay, so implied that Hobbes said something, and Calvin had said something back to him. And right, it's like, what was happening there? What I'm trying to drive at is that in order to really understand a lot of these things, I mean, they are simple little comic strips, but like there's a lot of kind of person to person unpacking that is required to make sense of why these are funny. What's really going on here? The goal of the entire thing, of course, is to do this without squishing out the joy. Okay, hi. So this is all just the love step so far. In class, when we to encourage to make the love easier, is we read it out loud and we act it out, and it's a lot of fun. People laugh a lot. Now, as part of the homework, though, to go to the next step, the curiosity step, what we do is, well, here, I'll show you the homework right now. Here's part of the syllabus right here. The basic thing is to go back and underline all the words or phrases or references that you don't understand. Do you see how then the purpose of that is to trigger curiosity? Curiosity often comes when you recognize that you don't know something. So you go, okay, I don't understand that. So with, these Calvin and Hobbes ones, kids always push against writing in their books, to which my response is, tough. Write in your book. It's required to for this. Mortimer Adler, the author of the book, pretentiously titled How to Read a Book, but the book brings the goods. It does what it says on the tin. It really teaches you how to read a book. One of the major things that he says is you can purchase a book and then it is yours legally, but it is not really yours intellectually until you write all of the over the book, underlining things, writing notes in it, connecting one part to another part, asking questions at the top or the bottom of the margins, all that sort of stuff, right? If you're interested in taking notes, learning how to take better notes in books, I teach a class called Reading Hacks that talks about some of that. It's on the store, but then his book, How to Read a Book, is like the gold standard in that. But for this, we save this to, okay, underline any of the words that you don't know. Maniacal, tyrant, pathetic. It's not like subjects like you learn about in school, right? Not like math. So what is this? Punny. Nope, it's not punny. It's puny, but you don't know that yet, right? Brute. I know what a brute is, but I don't know what brute labor is. Is he angry? This sounds like it has to do with the moon. I don't know what a whim is. Yeah, very good. Very good. And then to have them, the additional little mark that we have them write, is a question mark next to anything that they don't understand. Make sense? So just from that, great, wonderful. Now in class, no, it's probably easiest to switch to what the next step is on here. The mastery step is to quiz the Calvin and Hobbes dictionary for this week's pages. This is a thing that I send out. I guess I will be sending out this weekend for people who are signed up for. So here's what these look like. A bunch of pages. This is for Days of Just Pack, not for Essential Calvin and Hobbes, which is the one that we're reading this year. And then has a bunch of quotes from the book on the page number in the order that they appear, with the word that the kids might not know bold-faced on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side to have exactly the same sentence with just that word or phrase replaced by something synonymous. And then next to those, to have when relevant, a pronunciation key for that, because right, this is we've all heard about this pointed out before. Learning words that you can read but that you can't recognize when they're spoken or you can't say, that sucks. It's double sucks when you recognize that we have whatever the heck is going on in memory. I read lots about the cognitive science of memory, and I have no idea how memory works. But there seems to be a separate kind of memory, a separate memory storage thing for the way that words sound rather than the way that they look when they're written. So if you can say the word in your head, that helps you. What a weak little cough that was. How pitiful. It helps you remember the word overall when you know how it's pronounced. So I put those next there. Here, let's zoom in. and one of these. Here, this is actually from the one that we saw. If ignorance is bliss, this lesson would appear to be a deliberate attempt on your part to deprive me of happiness. You see, right? Bliss on one side, happiness on the other side, a deliberate attempt on your part, just I turn into you trying to deprive me of happiness. It is my best attempt to make all of the words and phrases of Calvin and Hobbes things that almost any kid automatically understands. Now, only will work if you understand what happiness means and stupidity means and enjoy means and story aspects means, right? So there's a certain kind of reading level that's the base that needs to be achieved for all of us to be understood. Although then you as the parent can help fill in some of these things too. And what I do, here's the next page of this. So what I do is I suggest that people cover up one side, look at the left-hand side, and say, okay, what does that basically mean? And then to check it. By moving this, I'm going to stray part of it, which is I have to rebuild it the next time I want to use it. To stop me from being happy. Okay, so as part of the homework, if the kid wants to do the mastery step, remember, love is just read it, enjoy it, lie down on a beanbag or a couch or something like that. Step 2, no, not step 2, the curiosity step is to write in the book. Step 3 is to pull up this. I keep saying step 3, maybe because it actually is step 3, right? But it's not necessary. Only the first part is necessary, the actual reading it and trying to enjoy it. If you don't enjoy it, you don't enjoy it. Is to actually quiz these and say, like which of these did I know? And then here's the crucial bit of this: when the kid finds that they understood it, that they take. I recommend doing this with colored pens or pencils because it's cool. Too small. To put a little, I'll do it right here. To put a little check on here. Oh, I knew that. Let's try the next one. The pursuit of which is my unalienable right, according to the Declaration. Most kids would not know what an unalienable right refers to. So they check this. They say, something no one is allowed to take away from me. Oh, that has nothing to do with weirdos from another planet. With the Grays video that just came out of Mexico with, extraterrestrials. Oh, okay. So I had no idea there. So what I will do is now put a little red X next to there. Obviously, you don't need the colors, but I like them. Okay, so imagine that, I don't know, Declaration, here, I'll just take both of these away. So I imagine that Declaration of Independence, let's say that the kid did not know that, but assert, they knew that that meant declare, or, like they read it and they're like, I know what it means, but I don't know how to put a word on it. I don't know, that can be fine. That can be fine. If they want to do, this really kind of hardcore, then all right, then, don't count those. Count those as missing, rather. But, if you want to just say you're doing this lightly, I kind of know what assert meant, and you read it means declare, and yeah, it feels right. Okay, great. Patriotic, great. Let's say that they know it. Prerogative, most kids do not know that. Most kids in the class did not know what a monarchist was. I spent a long time trying to define what a monarchist was. I spent a long time on that one particularly. I spend a long time on all of these. These take a really long time for me to make. I'm really proud of these, too. Blah, blah, blah. What am I talking about? Then the thing to do is to go through them again, but this time you don't need to go through the ones that you got right the first time, or at least probably you don't, right? Cover up. See, here, the bottom's me. There's no pants on right now. It feels wrong. Okay. Go ahead, and they would go back to this, and they'd say, okay, the pursuit of which is my unalienable right. Now, it's been a few minutes later, or it can be the next day or whatever. I recommend trying to lock this in the same day at first. Say, okay, do I remember what that means? Yes, I totally do. Declaration of Independence. Do I know what that means? No, I totally don't. Okay, so now the game becomes, can you get it? You keep going back through these ones that you initially got wrong. Can you get them right 3 times in a row? I don't mean like from 1 minute to the next. But like from the time, like the day or whatever, you come back to them. Can you get those right? When you can get them right, then you win. Congratulations. Um, yeah, that's basically what we do with that. So that's the mastery step. In class, of course, we also talk about the mastery of like what do some of these cultural references are. I think it's actually in this book that the band ZZ Top is referenced. Does anybody remember ZZ? I'm too young to really remember them. Mostly it's from the Calvin and Hobbes reference. I think there's a reference in The Simpsons too. Yes, yes, there is. I haven't thought about that in a long time. There's some cultural references that are in here. And we talk about that just to understand exactly what's going on there. So the mastery also happens in the class too. But the final step of these 4 steps, final layer there, that really, that is the better metaphor. Beyond love and curiosity and mastery is memory. I promised the moon, I said that there is this way, the scientifically most efficient way of locking something into your long-term memory. Yeah, and I can back that up. Let me back that up. Ooh, fantastic question. Is it okay for us to scan the pages and allow him to underline on the scan sheet two of 3 of us in the house have disabilities that will not allow books to be written in? I think I understand. I think I understand you. I think I understand. Yes, absolutely, absolutely, perfectly, blissfully fine. Yeah, no problem. Thank you. Thanks for asking that out loud. I'm glad for me to put that in the public record. That yeah, it totally is. All right, so this is one of the most important people in the history of science that nobody knows about. 1878, something like that. Wrote this book called On Memory, Origin of Experimental Psychology, and Ebbinghaus had laboriously measured himself and then a bunch of other people to see when they learn something, how long does it stay learned for? So, unsurprisingly, what he found is, if like your memory on something, if you learn something, it's really fresh, your memory is perfect, over time, that memory will tend to go down. The correlation between memory and time is negative. I'm not telling you anything that you haven't known since like maybe middle school when you're like, but I studied that. What? I can't remember it now. Here's the interesting question. How does it go down? Does it go down linearly like this? Call this option A. Does it go down linearly like this? Call this option B. Or does it go down, I guess this would be a different kind of logarithmic loss rather than exponential loss? Choice C. You have 10 seconds. Go ahead and throw in whether you think it's A, whether you think that the pattern of forgetting is A, B, or C. Three, two, one, and so it's B, which is the worst of all of those. The things that we forget deliriously quickly. We don't notice it. I mean, I suppose it'd be irritating if we did notice it. Like literally, at every moment of the day, you'd be going like bing, 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 right? As you'd feel yourself remember it. Or sorry, forget it. Also, what would you be forgetting? I guess you just, in this scenario, feel that something was being forgotten. That'd be the least useful spidey sense in the entire world of psychology. Okay, anyway, what this means is that almost everything that we help kids learn almost immediately becomes forgotten. And it's so bad. And it's so bad. And if this makes you right now feel like, wait, so is all of the teaching that I do for them, all the classes that I sign up, is it all worthless? The answer is probably no. And there are definitely some things, and some like ethoses, some just like moral values and like other values that like stick through, right? And education is that which remains after everything that has been learned has been forgotten, right? Just somebody said that once. Yeah. but also kind of, yeah, it's all a waste. I feel like taking, Ebbinghaus called this the forgetting curve. Taking the forgetting curve seriously should make us terrified. The good news is that there is a fix for this. What Ebbinghaus discovered after he mapped the exact shape of the forgetting curve, and if you're interested in this, go to Wikipedia and go for the forgetting curve. You can see the whole article on this. Yeah. Yeah. He found what's called the spacing effect, which is that if you try to just learn something one right after the other, sorry, if you learn something and then like you learn it again and again and again, it will decay at about the same rate. However, if you specifically wait after learning something and then sort of catch yourself in it, you let it partly be forgotten, and then you relearn it, you quiz it, your brain actually has to do some work to sort of, think of it as reconnecting two synapses, two neurons across a synapse. Reconnect one synapse or two neurons. There we go. It has to do that work, and so then it tells the brain, so to speak, to keep this memory along longer, or around longer. And then if you wait, right, this is not a very big gap. A day will do it. Honestly, like a few minutes or an hour will do it. Call this maybe a day. Okay, now like it gets forgotten a heck of a lot more slowly. And then if you wait a few days, it'll be forgotten a lot more slowly still. And then if you wait a really long time, right, like it will, like your memory of the thing, I'm just drawing that really badly, will stick around for a really, really long time. Okay, so this was discovered in 1870, whatever. And everyone ignored it because this isn't useful. Like, how can you keep track of something like this? It's impossible. There were a few weirdos who did do this themselves. One of them was a journalist with the last name Leitner. And so if you look up Leitner box, your Leitner system here, you will actually like learn about how somebody made this work for them. If anybody here knows the outfit Math for Love, they have a curriculum called Multiplication by Heart, which I heartily recommend. It is, to my knowledge, the best way of learning one's multiplication facts, and it is a physical Leitner box. It's also, there's a whole bunch of other beautiful things that are going on with there cognitively and just aesthetically. But they make a Leitner box for this. Well, in the 1970s, personal computers began to, slowly evolve. And somebody in Ukraine, Pyotr Wozniak, he made the first electronic Leitner box. He made an app, we call it now, that allowed him to put in flashcards, and then every day it would just tell him the flashcards that he would need to quiz for that day. They're the ones where the memory line had dipped down so that it matched this. I believe this is set at 80% is what has experimentally been shown to be in general the best practice for this. It says, okay, bing, it's time for you to relearn this, to requiz this thing. And so there is now, the one that he made, SuperMemo, is actually still publicly available. It's really wonky, hard to use. So we use this one, which is also really wonky and hard to use, frankly, but it's less so. This is the most general, trusted one, the one that all the other ones sort of aim at replicating, but making themselves different or easier or whatever. That's the one that we can be sure will be around in, well, most sure it'll be around in 20 or 30 years. So this is Anki. Usually people say Anki. I hate the way that sounds. Anki. Anki is the Chinese word for to learn something by heart. It's made by a guy who lives in New Zealand. I forget his name off the top of my head. Nice guy, though. And he, Damien Eels, I think. And I don't know, he's changed the world. There are all these geeks around the world who, all the things that we learn, we plug into our Anki decks. And so, like every morning I go into my Anki deck, and most mornings I go into my Anki deck and I, for like 5 minutes, just going to quiz the cards that it tells me to quiz that day. And then I keep them in my memory. I have 14 or 15,000 cards at this point in there. They have the names of everyone that I meet that I want to remember their name. Weird facts, great quotes from books, poetry, some math facts, and just like bizarre trivia sometimes. All sorts of things. It's changed my life because now I know that when I learn something, if I do just this little extra step of putting it in there, it will become a part of me. It won't be something that I just forget about, that I get eventually frustrated that I've forgotten. Why did I waste all that time? I look back at college and I think, why did I waste all that time? Honestly, like there are entire courses where I remember like two or three things from those courses. How many hours of that was of my life was that? How many dollars of was that? But if I just, after every single class, done one flipping Anki card, like the coolest, most important thing I learned that day from the class, right? Like I would know so much. I also remember all sorts of things that I didn't even write down because like those facts would have like kept the other facts kind of around the edges, right, in my memory to play with. Oh my gosh, I could be so smart right now. So this is the system that we make for students. I turn these. I turn the dictionary sheets into this one's really short just because it's the last part of this book. Into Anki cards. And so then if you want, and this is the sort of thing that you cannot push down. You can't force your kids to do it unless you have their buy-in. I won't say if maybe they don't want to do it, but you have to have their buy-in. And they have to have done the love, which is say the reading, the curiosity, which is say the underlining and note-taking, and the mastery, which is to say they have to have gone through this first and try to do this before doing the actual flashcards. But then you just download the flashcards that I send out every week, memory cards. So yeah, these ones kind of squish together in there. But I throw those in, and so you click the button for those, and then blammo, that's in your vocabulary deck in Anki if you want to do that. Super easy to use. I mean, there's a learning curve at the beginning, but it's a quick learning curve, which is to say it's a sharp learning curve, which is to say it's an unpleasant learning curve. An underappreciated aspect of learning curves is that you don't want them to be gradual. You actually want them to be sharp. So that's it. That's what reading comics is. In some ways, it's the smallest, stupidest thing, right? It's like you read Calvin and Hobbes and you enjoy them. And maybe you do some other things. That's it. You come to a class, I show up, I have kids volunteer to read some of the strips out loud for it, to read the Calvin's part, and then I do the other characters. And we laugh at it, and we have these geeky, weird conversations about the etymology of this word, or the ramifications, or the subtle implications of a certain phrase. Or like, wait, why is like Hobbes looking this way, but Calvin's over here? Oh my gosh, that actually, whoa, blows the whole text open. That's reading comics. It's so cool. It's so cool. It's so simple. If anybody like wants to just take exactly this model and like run with it and do this for other things, please do it. I feel like I want to be a missionary of this method of helping kids fall in love with reading. You can do it in a classroom. You can do it in a group of people, right? In physical space. You can do it online. It's so easy and so wonderful. Yes, Nicole, the specific Calvin Hobbes book that we're using this year is the Essential Calvin Hobbes. After doing a couple of my favorite books near the end of the 10-year run of Calvin Hobbes, 85 to 95, I wanted to go back and do the very first one because I thought that would be really cool. See how the whole thing started. Some of the strips are not as funny, I think, as he gets. I think he really hits his stride like in his fourth year. But like it's still great. I'm excited to do this. I should say that this really is for the year also, Right now we just have the store, like the part of it where we teach it from starting next Thursday, which is the 21st of September 2023, to December, through December. But we're going to be picking it up again, same time, exactly the same things, really, for the beginning of 2024, all the way through the endish of May, starting in mid-January. Yeah, yeah. So that's the plan. I didn't actually say that explicitly last year, and a lot of people had then booked themselves for other things who wish they hadn't. So I should say that now. We will probably be going through something like the entirety of the book in the course of the year. I haven't done the math yet to figure out exactly how far that will get. But yeah, with the other books, it was. Yeah, I gotta do the math on that. Let's talk arguing comics. If only because I don't know. So we would. So I have to apologize that I believe the class is entirely booked up or almost entirely booked up right now. So arguing comics happens immediately after the end of reading comics. I believe that they're both 40 minutes this year, but that's the sort of detail that frankly shouldn't trust me on. It's on the website. Arguing comics, we pick up with exactly the things that we usually start with the strip that we just talked about. And then, in the strips, we find some things to argue about. Because, I know I'm preaching to the choir here, but this is life in the 21st century because of certain technological advances. Twitter, Facebook. Everyone is angry at everyone all the time. And that sucks. It makes life terrible. The usual thing that people say is that, we should stop arguing. If that's your thing, great. That's fantastic. That's not my thing. I'm the other kind of person. I think that we should argue so much more than we do. But the arguing that we do should be done with kindness and with an attempt to actually figure out what is going on. Like, what is the actual difference of opinions when we have arguments? For fun, I run a local in Rochester, Minnesota group that just gets people together to carefully and openly argue politics and ethics and philosophy, and we did a thing on abortion a couple days ago. We're doing a thing on animal rights in a week and a half, and it's wonderful because when you argue carefully and well, and you know that the other person is going to do the same, you can have amazing conversations. That's what we cultivate in arguing comics. I try to teach the kids the moves of having amazing conversations. I will say that I am not as happy as I hoped to have been of teaching the abstract rules of that. I call attention to them when they come up, when we break one, we didn't even know it existed, or when we do a really good job of it. And I, call kids out who do a good job of it. And we have a, conversation when things break down, which is things have actually never broken down before. They have gotten heated at some point because of the nature of the topics that we talk about. So, topics that we talk about include things like, so you have things like, is Hobbes real? Because this, ended up being like a question that the kids, it turns out, had really different opinions about near the end of last year. And so, like, for homework, because it's some kind of impromptu homework, I had kids go through some of the strips that we had read already and say, okay, like, I believe that Hobbes is real. And if he's not real, then how would you guys explain this? Or, like, I think that Hobbes is imaginary. Hobbes is not imaginary, then how would you guys explain this? And then there's actually this middle realm of that Hobbes is a hallucination, that Calvin is not. Sorry, Calvin is the boy and Hobbes the tiger. I probably should say that. That Calvin is not in control of. Like, Calvin thinks that Hobbes is real, but everyone else knows that he's not. That was we got to look up the DSM-5 definition of psychosis. With that one, we had these sort of metatextual arguments about. Wait a second, like someone made the argument that this strip wouldn't be funny if it's about a boy who has psychosis or something like psychosis. I forget exactly what the diagnosis that we thought most would match that was. Um, and and we talked about, like, is that even like an argument that you can use in this? Or um, where's the part about? I think we didn't write it in here, but someone pointed to something that the author of the strip, Bill Watterson, had said in a commencement address at Kenyon College, his alma mater, I think, back in the 1986 or something like that. And they said, based on the thing that he says in a speech, I don't think that he would, think that that Hobbes is a hallucination, or one of the other ones. I can't remember which. And so then we had this meta textual conversation of, when you're arguing what Calvin and Hobbes means, are you allowed to cite things that are not in it? And then we had another conversation of, well, like, if Bill Watterson said that this is what the truth is, he doesn't, or at least he seems not to. Although there are different ways of reading his claim on this, which we talked about. But if he said, look, everyone, Hobbes is imaginary, just get over it. Or look, everyone, Hobbes is real. Come on, it's obvious, right? Would that mean that Hobbes is what he said he was? The meaning of a text, does that come about if the author says something? Is that in the author's head? Or is that just whatever we want it to be? Or is it somehow in the text itself, and what we want and what the author wants is immaterial to what the text itself actually says? And if you say that, if there's something that's ambiguous, can you like draw in for anything what the author says, or for like what you feel, right? Like, now these are, like, my wife has a degree in English literature, right? Like, took a bunch of literary theory classes. Like, these are things that are argued about, that people write dissertations about, right? Like the death of the author moment that happened in the mid 1980s, I think. Of like, oh, the meaning of the text is not actually in the author's head even. We don't care about the author anymore. It's a radical position, but it's still held by some. We talked about all these things. Now, if you're thinking about this right now, if you're hearing all this right now, and you're thinking that, wow, my kid would hate that. That's so boring. Great, wonderful. Totally, the class is not for them. If you're like, oh man, my kid would love it so much. I apologize if there's not presently any room, I think, in that. Feel free to go in the store and see if there's a seat or two left. But what? Yeah, we have to cap off the number of students in that, just because we it's all cameras on, and kids, that one's all cameras on, and kids make verbal arguments to each other, and at some point you just, it becomes too big of a class, and kids can't talk as much as they need to be able to talk. We also, that was what I just was citing, was mostly what we talked about in the spring. What we talked about in the fall was mostly meta ethics, which is to say, where does morality come from? Which is to say, why is it wrong to kick a dog? Assume that you believe that it's wrong to kick defenseless dogs, right? Why? And maybe you're like, oh, it's because they feel pain. Okay, so apparently you think that there's a law that says, an ethical law that says, you shouldn't cause unnecessary pain in another sentient creature, whatever the word sentient, conscious creature. Okay, why? All right, well, you wouldn't like it if they did it to you. One kid made this argument. And another kid made the argument back that, yeah, but what if they can't do it to you? What if it will never be done to you? We could cook up some absurd situation, or we could just say, what if you know for a fact that they won't do it for you? Is it still wrong then? Is it fine if it causes you joy to kick dogs, right? Then should you kick the dog? Because it will cause you more joy than it will hurt the dog, if there's in that sort of situation, right? We played with that idea. This is, like, one of the most classic arguments in all of philosophy, going back at least to Plato. We talked about it. We had a mature, wonderful conversation. We had a wonderful split in that class between, in particular, and if you are the parent of one of these kids, thank you so much for letting them be in the class. Oh my gosh, they made this part of it so much fun. A conservative religious theist who said that all morality derives from God. In God's nature, that morality was not something that God invented, and it could not have been the other way, but neither is God controlled by moral law. It is part of God's intrinsic nature, which we probed some too. And then another student in the class was a secular, I'm trying to remember what, it ended up being something like sort of a postmodern existentialism. At least was her ethical system, if I'm remembering it correctly. No, that was somebody else. She was something of an absurdist. And we had this whole conversation about like, how can you be like a quasi-nihilist and think that there is no good or right or wrong and derive ethics from that and think that it's still wrong to kick a dog. Oh my gosh, those two students in particular, like just like went back and forth at it for the entire first half of the year last year. And we all benefited so much from that. It got spicy, it got hot. It never stopped being respectful. It never stopped being open and charitable. It never stopped being both parties presenting like the throats of their argument to one another and saying like, I want to make my own perspective easy to critique, which was incredible. I don't remember if any minds were changed from that conversation. I sort of assume not, but I think lots of minds were opened. Oh gosh, just one of those times, right? Like where like most weeks, just leave that and thinking, I can't believe I'm so lucky to be able to do this with these people. All right, age range of students in arguing comics. So if we say that on the website, then that's the one that I gave the thought to. So we should take a look at that first. I'll go back and then go to this, and then I will go to. I'll point out the thing that if you get arguing, it's required that you come to reading comics first if you're going to do arguing comics. So to buy arguing comics gives you both of those, which is why it's so much more expensive. Practice disagreeing. Book recommendation. Very good book. Problematic book. So really good book. Really? Well, apparently we don't give an age range on here. So I would just say that anything where kids are okay to do the kinds of arguments that you were just hearing. I don't know that we had anybody younger than age 8 in that particular class, but I can't cite that for sure. We definitely had some people who were 15 in that class. Great question. All right. If there are no other questions, then I will end this. Thank you so very much for coming to this. It's been a pleasure. The provisional plan is to keep doing this for years because, frankly, I love it. I don't know if let's manage to construe that or manage to send off the loving it vibes here. Toodles. Pleasure.